When autism is a spectrum, what is the process for getting a diagnosis for different people who are neurodivergent?
And what kind of different resources are there for children and adults with Asperger's and ADHD?
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast, where we'll share stories, experiences, support, resources, and more for people with disabilities and different abilities. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. My name is Deaf Jeff Herbert.
And my name is Kurt Hower. We're talking with Eric Conklin, a reporter from New Jersey Advanced Media, about his experiences with ADHD and autism. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I appreciate it. Hope you guys are having a good morning.
Yeah, we are. Thank you. You too. Eric, please tell us about yourself and how you were first diagnosed.
I'm a reporter, as Kurt said, for NJ Advanced Media, the publisher of NJ.com. I've been a full-time journalist, or I've worked in journalism full-time now for 6 years, I want to say. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which many of us now know is no longer, it's put under the branch of ASD. I also know that the new term that a lot of people use now is neurodivergent or neurodivergency, so that could kind of cover it broadly. I was probably maybe 6, 7 years old, and I remember that I used to have like crying outbursts in school. My mom was brought in to visit with my teacher, and I guess my teacher just kind of told her, I've worked in education a long time, and I just don't see something right here. I would maybe recommend you seeing if maybe he could get looked at by a specialist. And I kind of remember this, the meeting. I can. It's crazy that I can still remember this. And this is like over 20 years ago. I remember, it was after school. My mom came in. She's talking with my teacher. I'm playing with some of the classroom things by myself, and I have no idea what the adults are talking about, and probably at that point would I really care? I'm just, probably at that point happy to see my mom after like an 8-hour school day. So I guess that, one of the theories was that she being my teacher, thought that I might be having seizures. And I didn't really know that this was like really a thing. I ended up going to a doctor's office, and I had a sleep study done. I remember being hooked up to so many wires. I remember them all over my head, all over my chest. Maybe some of them ended up going on my legs. I mean, everywhere. Like, it just looked like octopus tentacles. And I remember that, I go in the room, I get in under the covers, it's a whole bed and everything. It's like an actual bedroom. I just laid there and tried to get some rest. And I think occasionally when I was trying to fall asleep, there was like a little monitor that was keeping an eye on me, and I was watching it. And then I guess I fell asleep, got up, left, have a good day. And then the test results came back. They said, nope, no seizures. I said, okay, now where do we go? So I guess then I was brought to another specialist that deals with cases of spectrum disorders. I think that initially the diagnosis was ADHD, or that was the main theory, was ADHD. So this is like 2002. I think it was maybe a year or two later, I was referred to another specialist, and then she kind of examined more of the traits that I showed, and then I guess it told my mom. I think this is possibly a case of Asperger syndrome, and my guess is she might have said something along the lines of, I'm pretty sure you probably won't know what that is, so let me sit down and explain it. And that's how I was diagnosed.
Okay, as a child, as you went through this, what kind of treatments or resources were you given?
As a child, I remember that I was prescribed Buspar. You may or may not know of it. It's kind of like I think it's an anxiety medication, and I remember that I kind of was still showing a lot of the traits. I think at the time of difficulty with social skills and building relationships and things. So I remember, I can remember this one clear as day. I went to the doctor, and he said, how to explain this to like a 10-year-old. and said, well, Eric, we're going to have you take some medication and it's just going to help keep you calmer, okay? And I said, well, is this med going to help me make friends, or is this what it's supposed to do? And he said, well, no, unfortunately, you still have to make the friends, but this is at least going to keep you calmer. And mind you, at 10 years old, you don't really, I don't think, fully comprehend any of this. Like, you don't really understand it. What else did I go through as a child? The one I really remember most was I was put into like a group therapy session with a bunch of other kids, and I think it was maybe like I want to say like maybe 7, 8 of us, something like that. If you were to go in that room now, you could kind of really, when people say that everybody on the spectrum is different, you could clearly see that. I was somebody that was apparently, the specialist thought was a very mild case, shows traits, but is able to have some sort of relationships with people and understands people. You could clearly see a difference between me and some of the other kids I was with. I remember just like sometimes a lot of them had challenges regulating emotions, and they would get very upset over very simple things. And I remember one kid had said something that he like, oh, I guess I said something wrong, or I shouldn't have. He gets up and in frustration he like tapes his mouth shut with scotch tape. And there was a few other cases where some other kids were had struggled a little bit more than probably I did. But I think early on it kind of helped me, and looking back at it, it definitely helped me maybe understand a little bit more about what the spectrum can look like and how they might interact with people and such.
Yeah, you bring up an important point. I actually have a friend that is on the spectrum, and often they have difficulty making eye contact, and people tend to avoid interacting with them or communicating with them altogether. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts about that. Has that happened to you? Do you have any advice for how we might better communicate with someone on the spectrum?
Eye contact, yeah. So I'm definitely someone that still sometimes struggles with this, especially I think that if I can't think of a thought at the top of my head, or like maybe a quickly lose train of thought, I will look off and sometimes not make eye contact with another person. Doesn't probably maybe happen as often as maybe when I was younger, but definitely still something, still definitely something I deal with today. I don't really know. Advice, that's a good question. I think that I just sort of made it kind of more of a priority subconsciously as I got older to try to maybe focus on making eye contact more. And if I kind of maybe prioritize that, then I think that kind of ended up helping me. It's kind of it might be kind of hard to explain, but I just think as I got older, I was able to be a little bit more mindful of that. And I kind of was able to kind of adjust to it as I got older. There's definitely a very big difference in with autism spectrum disorder in adults versus autism spectrum disorder in children, and that's one area where I feel as though I was able to kind of cope a little bit more as I got older, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, and for me, my advice to others would be to engage. I think it's important, and I've had some really enriching conversations with this person, and come to find out they're not that much different than I am. And it's just the way in which they communicate.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And everybody's different, and I think that what I've learned is who you might be is, with ASD at age 10 or 9, 8, small child, you're not going to be the same person really at age 30 like me. And, everybody's very different. It's a big spectrum out there, and it's, can be very clear to see sometimes.
Eric, you mentioned group sessions and medication. Are there different tools or support that you receive now as an adult?
Yeah, actually, just recently, I sat down with a therapist to just talk about things in everyday life that I'm kind of going, have been going through. When it comes to like, I think trying to identify and cope with some of these characteristics and traits that I think might be playing a little bit part of my daily life even today. So, I think that like one thing is like I can be a very, at times, forgetful person. And I think that sometimes it's because I can show symptoms of ADHD and I'm a little bit sometimes forgetful. She had suggested taking notes and, trying to be a little bit more mindful when it comes to, the relationships I have and trying to be present in them. I think that it was just kind of good to hear that again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you find it easier to make connections or friendships with people who are on the spectrum?
Yeah, I think that I have friends that are and aren't on the spectrum. And it's kind of crazy too because sometimes I've befriended them and then I come to find out that they are on the spectrum and I have no idea. Like I'm pretty sure that I was friends with a guy in college and we bonded over sports and stuff and come to find out, like I think it just came up in conversation one day that like I have Asperger syndrome, or I was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome, and he's like, yeah, so do I. I was like, wait, what? I was kind of baffled a little bit. I hadn't thought anything about it. I would say that I definitely have friends still on the spectrum now, or at least people that consider themselves neurodivergent. And then I have friends that aren't on the spectrum, and we have the greatest relationships ever. I mean, yeah, they've brought me a lot of places, and I'm very thankful for it, and I'm thankful for the friends I've made and the relationships I've built as I've gotten older.
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We love to share different stories because even when it feels like it, you're not alone. We're not defined solely by the things we can't do when there's so many things we can do.
Yeah, and we'd love to know, Eric, a little bit more about your life and how this is outside of work. Also, how is it dealing with work?
It hasn't fully prevented me from having the typical, everyday life that some might think doesn't really happen with somebody with my condition. For example, I'm getting married next week. So
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's officially as of right now. It's as of today. It's exactly 7 days. So I'm
Great.
Definitely. I got the jitters going a little bit. So I've been able to have pretty much a normal life as I've gotten older. I definitely showed a lot of those traits as a kid. Like, for example, I could have really been sometimes a little bit of annoying to people when I was younger, and I think kids really didn't like me for that, and I could really never understand why. I could never really understand that concept about how something could be coming off as wrong or socially incorrect or just, not really forming a real strong relationship with some of the other kids in school. I used to be, when they talk about people with ASD or that are on the spectrum having like a real infatuation with something, I totally used to be that infatuoso with model railroading and trains and stuff when I was a kid, and I know that's very common. And nowadays I can't sometimes really stand trains because when I have to rely on them to get to where I need to go and they're late or they're blocking the road, yeah, I'm sometimes not happy. So it's kind of really ironic that I used to be obsessed with that subject when I was a kid, and now I'm really not. But anyway, yeah, and I think just that, and I think some of the social anxiety when I was younger was a little bit more prevalent. As I said, I struggled a lot to make friendships. That definitely changed as I got older, because I think that people just kind of really became more acceptant of me, and things just kind of change as you get older. And some people might understand conditions a little bit more than they were when they were younger. I definitely still at least struggle sometimes with social skills. I definitely still show the traits of that intense interest in a topic. I think that sometimes just comes in the different form now of maybe it's a certain story that I'm covering or I've been covering for NJ.com. Sometimes people like that make the best journalists because they have a really intense interest in a topic, and that really helps them continue to pursue a story. They're always interested. They're always forward thinking. They always want to keep trying to learn more about a specific thing. And I think that intense interest in something really can produce some pretty valuable reporting. But outside of, work and in everyday life, my fiance and I enjoy our time together. We definitely love our share of TV shows. We just enjoyed 3 seasons of The Summer I Turned Pretty, and had a little bit of a banter on if we're Team Jeremiah or Team Conrad, like everybody else is. So we had some fun with it. We've gone on a few trips together, and we mostly have a very happy life together. I've also built a lot of great friendships over the years. I enjoy, we all enjoy sports, watching sports, and then we've gone on a few trips to watch some football games in the last 4 years. So these guys have helped me get on a plane for the first time and go across the country, see new places, and everything you kind of you'd want out of a group of friends. So it's been pretty rewarding and gratifying.
That's awesome.
So right now there's a lot of misunderstanding about autism, ADHD, and what do you wish more people knew or understood about you and others with similar experiences?
I think what I'd want people to most know about people that have been diagnosed with these kinds of conditions is that they're very unique individuals, and that they really bring a lot of special traits to society, to work, to their friendships, and and then if in the times when it might seem that they struggle with controlling emotions and stuff like that, which I definitely sometimes do, and it's definitely challenging. I just wish that maybe some people would take a moment to actually think, it's not a case of bad behavior. They just they struggle a lot to regulate those emotions, and sometimes it turns into an outburst, sometimes it turns into anxiety, and it's not necessarily their fault, and it's not them acting intentionally. It's just challenging. I think also maybe just understanding the traits a little bit more, as far as like one-sided conversations I've known as one, and I'm definitely guilty of that still, where you definitely get on that one specific topic, and then you just kind of roll with it and you don't stop talking, and it can get very overwhelming for the other person. I'm definitely someone that's guilty of that, and whoever's listening, I'm very sorry if I've been that person at times, but I think I would really want people to kind of more understand the traits, and also the fact that, like I said, everybody is unique. Everyone shows different traits. Some show them more than others, and every case is very different. And I think I would want to just overall just wish that, and I would hope that some people maybe just take a moment to actually sit back and actually just take a moment to think and say, you know what, the person I'm interacting with now, or I see at the store that's, or the kid that's having a little bit of an outburst or something, they're, maybe it's really something that's truly not 100% their fault, and just to be a little bit more aware of it, because a lot of people, especially parents too, have to cope too and help their child and support their child, or even their adult child, with some of this stuff.
Eric, thank you for taking the time to talk with us and share your story and your experiences. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share?
Yeah, there's definitely one I've thought of recently going into this. My therapist that I talked to had used a really great term that I think really resonates well with the autistic community, and that people with these types of conditions are not disabled; they're differently abled. And I'd heard that before in my life, and I think that just recently it was probably really rewarding to just hear that again, because I think from time to time that's something that all of us can probably benefit from hearing. Everybody's differently abled. I mean, I've definitely supposed to be someone that's technically struggles with relationships and struggles with interacting with people, and I still do at times. You know, not to tout myself, I'm in a position in a career path that I put myself in these social situations too, especially with very prominent people. And I mean, some people might not think that that's possible, but here I am, you know. And I think that the best message I can tell anybody is that if you can start to really understand the diagnosis, I think that you have a pathway forward to kind of overcoming some of those challenges. Like I said, when I was younger, I couldn't really understand any of this. I just knew I had something called Asperger's, and I couldn't really understand the concept of it because, I mean, look, what kid can? And it wasn't until maybe I got a little bit older and like started to get into high school, is when and probably more so late middle school and into high school, that I kind of did some research on it and really tried to watch some documentaries on it. And I saw a lot of people that were, you know, interviewed that felt the same way like I did. Like, I can't read a person. I can't tell if they're frustrated with me or not. And I said, you know what, that sounds like just like me. I've been through this situation so many times. And I think that as I was able to understand the concepts of Asperger's, or now ASD, I was able to kind of identify the traits that I might show and try to form ways to, you know, overcome them. And I think that's my biggest message, is that it's definitely possible. And if you're someone out there that is, you know, has an autism spectrum disorder, or is on the spectrum in any way, or neurodivergent in any way, there is definitely a path forward for you. Don't think that you don't have one. Don't think that because you have this diagnosis, you cannot succeed, because you clearly can.
Love it. Thank you again for joining us. This is Enable the Disability Podcast. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
And please share this podcast with your family and friends so we can share more stories about people who are differently abled. Thank you.